Thank you, Mr. Bakshi, for your comments. Now I'd like to call our next panelist to offer his comments for the next 8 minutes, Mr. Claudio González Vega, Professor Emeritus at Ohio State University in the U.S.
Madam Chair, dear Sam, fellow panelists, it is a great pleasure to share this session with you, dear friends. These have been 3 extraordinary days. What have made them particularly enjoyable have been those few minutes, sometimes a few seconds, perhaps some relaxed conversation over dinner, when I have been able to hug you, to hear your voice, to see the bright lights in your eyes. And it is funny that such face-to-face encounters, like the encounters between a loan officer and individual clients, represent the best, what is at the heart of microfinance as we know it, as a human experience, also as a business model. The best part of being here has been to meet so many young people. As Juan Vicente Herrera was saying at the inauguration, this is a summit of hope, and it is precisely your presence, young men and women, that makes this afternoon particularly enjoyable. I am addressing you specifically. I much enjoy reading the 2 papers. They are rich in details, rich in examples, rich in generosity, rich in aspirations. They cover many experiences. They raise many issues. All 85 pages of it. It is impossible for me to address any of these. Instead, what I like to do is build from some assumptions and from my experience some basic framework. I hope a powerful framework to understand and evaluate the contributions of the papers. What are the implications of the recommendations? What are the challenges that they pose? What threats, what dangers may lie ahead? What are the opportunities that come with them? You may ask me, tell us in one phrase what has been the central realization, the great insight of microfinance. And the answer is that finance is at the center of the lives of the poor. We know that health matters a lot. We know that investment in human capital are key for bringing people out of poverty, for economic growth. We acknowledge that nutrition and food security and housing and potable water and moving people out of energy poverty, what a beautiful concept. All of this is tremendously important for improving the welfare of the poor. And these are things that contribute to a better life directly. And yet, without access to efficiently provided finance, there will be less health. There will be less nutrition. There will be less human capital. There will be less welfare. These financial services are only intermediate inputs. They go into that black box that we don't know yet very well, that allows poor people to transform their efforts into some intergenerational improvements of their lives. We have known this. This has been recently revisited in a very compelling fashion by the portfolios of the poor. This was probably the most significant insight from Professor Yunus. So, my propositions. 1, finance matters. It matters for the poor. It makes their livelihoods better. It matters for them precisely because they are poor. And if it matters for them, there is going to be a very legitimate demand, but it is an unsatisfied demand for financial services. Why? Second proposition, because it is very difficult to deliver these financial services, barriers and obstacles that make it very costly. And as a result, we have an insufficient supply. Of course, innovations are always magic. They create something out of nothing. And the magic of microfinance as an innovation was to offer new ways of producing financial services in a cost-efficient, in a sustainable manner. And with this cheaper, better inputs in the production functions of their livelihoods, the poor expect a chance, an stochastic promise for having a better life. So how does this happen? Third proposition. Microfinance has a greater chance of improving lives if we recognize heterogeneity. There is tremendous heterogeneity among the poor, particularly among the rural poor. To the untrained eye, they all look the same. It is our ignorance, our arrogance that doesn't allow us to distinguish that they are so different, so unique. And microfinance is at its best when it acknowledges this heterogeneity, when we respect the individuality of each one of the clients. And we will find a socially optimum supply of finance only when we recognize this, that poverty has too many faces, that there is tremendous diversity in what the poor are lacking, that they are poor for very different reasons, that poverty is dynamic and lack and choices are changing it all the time. So if heterogeneity is the reality, standardization is the greatest threat. It is the greatest weakness of microfinance in the beginning, and it is our greatest threat for the future. So microfinance is at its best when it hugs each client as a unique individual, each one with a different demand for a very different variety of financial services, each one hoping that finance will play a very different role in their lives, each one expecting impacts that are so unique and heterogeneous that is why it is very difficult to measure them, each one hoping that we will evaluate their creditworthiness on the basis of their individuality, each one looking and expecting services that are tailored to their particular demands, to their particular capabilities. If we want to save microfinance, we need to rediscover our clients, but rediscover them in their individuality, respect them as different, unique individuals. So differentiation is the critical challenge. Market failure in financial markets emerges from pooling equilibria that treat different risks as if they were the same. That's why there is market failure in finance. Insufficient impacts emerge because, because we offer standardized products that do not match the circumstances of these clients. And satisfied customers leave because their particular needs are not met if the services are not differentiated. But differentiation is very costly. It is the ideal, but it will require continued innovation to be able to differentiate at a reasonable cost. And microfinance, of course, was such an innovation. It made it possible to broaden the range of criteria for evaluating creditworthiness. We didn't say we are going to judge you on the basis of the property that you offer as collateral. We are going to judge you on the basis of honesty, imagination, hard work, creativity, perseverance, all of this that makes you different, that makes you unique. And for that reason, we are celebrating the success of microfinance now. And we may ask, has the task been completed? Has the task been accomplished? And unfortunately, the answer is that we are still a long way from offering the poor this optimal set of financial services. We can think about the various dimensions of outreach. Not sufficient people are being reached, the poorest are being left behind, the quality of services has much to be desired, the costs are very huge, many institutions are fragile and unsustainable. So we now can put the threads of these arguments together. A broad range of financial services matter. Finance matters for the poor. The optimal supply of these services should differentiate. The first and foremost social responsibility of microfinance institutions would be to respond to these demands for finance, if we indeed believe that finance is at the center of their lives, and to respond by lowering the costs of offering each time more and more tailor-made financial services that will fit their circumstances. Okay. So what do we learn for this task from the papers of this afternoon? Resources are limited. Time, effort, managerial attention, creative innovation might be invested in improving this supply of financial services, or it may be allocated to any of a broad range of all other types of non-financial services. At this simple level, there is a trade-off. And this should bring us to pause for a second. But the answer is not so simple, and there are two sets of reasons why we need to look at the papers and look for some light there about what needs to be done. First, there are organizations that have visions, missions that value other outcomes, not just finance. And this is entirely legitimate. There is a trade-off, however, and they will have to find the right combination. How to combine these services. I learned about this from that wonderful woman in Bolivia, Carmen Velasco, or from my colleagues like Chris Dunford. But the outcome of this combination is less than perfect financial services, very valuable, and less than perfect health interventions, for example, and still a very powerful combination. And I have great respect for these initiatives, but as well as I have for those that specialize and offer broader, cheaper range of just financial services. One warning very quickly: if one keeps adding other non-financial services, complexity increases more than proportionately. And unless the organization is very robust, unless it has a sterling governance in place, unless internal control mechanisms are impeccable, adding these managerial and information burdens may break their back. That's why BRAC is so unusual. Please give me a second. It's the kind of organization that can do this. My second caveat is that indeed there are synergies, that the simultaneous provision of finance and non-finance enhances value added, creates economies of scope. This is particularly true in agriculture. Calvin Miller yesterday at the panel had a fantastic paper about this. The example of Nuestra Gente in Peru is a very good example about this. There are several ways of doing this. But we need to make these strategic choices. There is not one recipe for everyone. As we look into the future, we need an environment of experimentation, freedom, creativity, willingness to take risks, willingness to learn, diversity, competition, above all, tolerance for all kinds of differences. These are the attitudes that I found at the summit, particularly among the young attendees, and for this reason, I think this is a summit of hope, and I am grateful for the patience of my chair.